Hello, I'm Pamela Young, and this is Thrive 2030, brought to you by growthcurv. It's my great pleasure today to welcome Rbbie McRobbie, who is the Chief Executive of the Hong Kong Rugby Union. So we're visiting him in Hong Kong today. How are you, Robbie?
Hello, Pamela. Lei ho ma, as we say in Cantonese here in Hong Kong. So it's a lovely, lovely, warm, sunny day here in Hong Kong.
Okay, but you've got the air conditioning on, I hope.
Full blast.
Full blast. Good on you. Okay, well, I'm going to join you in lovely Hong Kong. If you just give me a moment to find my favourite spot on the top of the hill there.
Wow.
That's your beautiful city, is it not?
It is. You chose well. Yeah, wonderful. A wonderful vista.
Someone's done a really nice job at that, colouring up that shot. Now, Hong Kong is one of my favourite spots. Haven't been there for a while, obviously. But let's just introduce you and the Hong Kong Rugby Union. So, folks, Robbie has been the Chief Executive at the Hong Kong Rugby Union since 2017. Prior to that, he was the community rugby manager for a number of years. So you've been there a total of about 18 years. So you know the institution really well and have a very big family community within that organisation, I understand. Prior to that, Robbie was in the Hong Kong police force for 10 years, so has a really strong sense of the Hong Kong community and some of the ups and downs of the journey over the last couple of decades. And I'm quite interested to hear from Robbie his view about how they've been managing with COVID, with the backdrop of some political upsets over the last 12 months, which have made it even harder for them. Now, Robbie, you belong also to a number of charities, I understand.
I'm fortunate enough to be, I'm on the committee of the St Andrew's Society and the Scottish Business Group. So I am from origin a proud Scotsman. In fact, my father he's still resident in Scotland. It was his 91st birthday over the weekend. So
oh, how lovely!
I was very, very sad. Another COVID story, unable to get back for that. But,
a moment missed.
Yeah, but I joined his birthday lunch by Zoom, Pamela. So
fantastic! I'm so glad you did not miss out.
No. But yeah, so very active in the Scottish expatriate community here.
Yes.
But also I'm involved. I'm a director of a local charity called Operation Breakthrough,
yes,
which was set up by former and current police officers and uses sport as a medium to try and help at-risk youngsters. And here within the Rugby Union, we have our own community foundation, our own charity that we set up in 2013, which again does very similar things, uses sport to try and tackle some of the social issues that we are facing, including some of those that have been accentuated by COVID-19.
Yes. This is one of the reasons why I reached out to ask to talk with you, because I had heard about that amazing work that you've done in the community. And I think that COVID has highlighted the tenuous intersection between business and society, because it's not an economical financial crisis like the Y2K or the Wall Street crash or GFC. This is a health crisis, and it's impacting communities all over the world and societies and families. So it's one of the things I'd like to talk with you as we go through today. But before we do that, I'd also like to say congratulations for that Queen's Award that you got a couple of years ago in NBE for your work with some of these charities, and also in building the relationship between Hong Kong and the UK, or at least helping to maintain it. So that's definitely something to be noted. Well done there.
Thanks, Pamela. And again, because of COVID, I still haven't received it. I haven't been able to get back the investiture. So.
Oh no.
Yeah. So still maybe next year. Hopefully.
Something to look forward to then, Robbie.
Absolutely.
Dear. Now listen, let's just frame up the picture, help people understand a little bit about the Hong Kong Rugby Union for those who are not Rugby Sevens fans, because I'm sure the Sevens fans know you really well. Now, the Rugby Union is the governing body for the union in Hong Kong, and you've got 21 memberships and 10,000 members, 21 clubs with 10,000 members.
Yeah, that's right. So we're a company. I guess we're an SME, we have 96 full-time employees. We also have about 50 full-time male and female athletes engaged in sevens programs. We've been in existence since 1952, and as you quite rightly say, we have, our membership is 21 clubs, associations, and we look after around 10,000 registered players of all ages, as well as running schools programs. We have programs in over 200 local primary schools, over 100 local secondary schools, 20 tertiary institutions. So, you know, we're by no means the largest participation sport in Hong Kong. That would be, well, actually, the most popular sport here by a long way is horse riding, or betting on horse racing. But you know, we're a strong, vibrant community, and as you say, we've been very fortunate because three individuals in a pub in 1976 decided it would be a good idea to organise a rugby sevens tournament. Thanks to their initiative and creativity, we have been lucky enough to have one of the most iconic global sports events since then. So it would have been the 45th year last year, and we're still looking forward to the 45th event. But that has provided us with a up to COVID, as we'll talk about, a very stable source of income and revenue, which has allowed us to actually have a considerable impact in our community, not just on the rugby pitches, but more broadly through sport and into society.
I know the sevens is a very popular tournament because I'm very conscious of the hundreds or thousands of people climbing on planes at that particular time of the year to leave the cities I've been living in: London, Singapore, Auckland, you know, Sydney, and you know, it's a mass exodus to get up there to spend the week with you. So let's now hear about the story, because as you say, it's a massive contributor to your revenue, your major revenue source, and of course if you don't produce the revenues, your clubs don't get a share of what their take would be from those revenues. So it's a very big knock-on effect, isn't it? Right down into the small community clubs and to the players. I think at first you postponed it and then you cancelled it. Can you just describe how that must have felt for you as the chief executive of this organisation where you've been for 18 years? It must have been quite a sad moment when you had that realisation that you needed to take that action. Yeah,
it has been, I mean, the last 18 months or plus now, it has been such a roller coaster for us here. And again, I mean, I suppose at the outset I should say that this is talking very much about our journey and my journey, but I'm very conscious of the fact that there are so many other organisations, companies, individuals, you know, who've had dreadful times during COVID. But in terms of what we went through, we were obviously pretty close to the epicenter in Wuhan when this all kicked off. We had just been kind of coping with the aftermath of social unrest in Hong Kong as well. So that we kind of been working our way through the risk analysis of, we were due to have a sevens tournament in April 2020. We've been concerned about social unrest, but we worked our way through that. And then, you know, the turn of the year, and you know, we started to hear that this new disease has reared its head. And of course, for us in Hong Kong, we were very much at the heart of the SARS epidemic in 2003. So there was a real sense of deja vu and an early realization of what it could mean. Because in 2003, Hong Kong was like a ghost town. It was a very, very strange place to be living at that time. Lots of people moved out of Hong Kong temporarily because of their concerns around the disease. Everything ground to a halt pretty much. And in fact, one of the few events that did carry on in 2003 was the Rugby Sevens. So at an early stage, we were faced with this challenge of, okay, we're due to have a rugby sevens in a few months' time. Should have been in April. What do we do? And I think our initial reaction was, well, maybe we can tough it out. Maybe it'll be like 2003. Maybe we'll be setting a great example of how you demonstrate that Hong Kong is still open for business and you can get beyond this. And if you remember back in that time, there were still hopes that this would be something that would be burnt out during the summer and it wouldn't survive high heat and all this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Well, it didn't take long.
That. Yeah, I remember hearing that. The high heat was going to kill it off. That's right. It was going to be a winter flu.
Exactly,
Yes.
exactly. And I guess as the weeks went by, the realization hit home that it wasn't going to be like that. So we made the decision to postpone. The sevens generates 95% of our revenue. So cancellation is obviously catastrophic. So at that point, it was like, okay, we'll postpone and we'll have it in October last year, 2020.
Yeah.
We're very fortunate that World Rugby, who run the World Seven Series, so we're one of 10 events, they were very supportive with ourselves and the other tournaments. The government here were also supportive. So we got new dates, stadium booked. Okay, we're going to go ahead in October. We realized, though, that even with that, it wasn't a certainty, and we were going to have to start looking at the union's finances and our long-term financial sustainability. And this was something we'd been aware of for a while. I mean, the business model of relying on one event for 95% of your revenue is not the greatest. Let's be honest, it's not ideal. You don't find that in the manual saying this is the greatest.
You're not the only one that got caught out thinking that the world would just continue forever. And
no,
we had the experience. We know now we need a couple of alternatives.
Absolutely, and to be fair to our board of directors and to myself and the management team, we were already, like many rugby unions and many, particularly rugby unions, though, we were already looking at the commercial, the fragility of the business model and what we would need to do going forward. So I have to say that the pandemic for us was an accelerant or a catalyst to move forward more quickly with organizational reviews, structural reviews, things that we would have done, but we'd probably done it over an 18-month or 2-year period. We ended up doing over a 2 or 3 month period.
So did you come up with some new ideas about revenue streams for the future to future-proof your business?
Yeah. So there were two key things that we did, and this was all going on around sort of March, April, May last year. The first thing was we realized that we needed to address some of our recurrent costs. We brought in an external consultant to help us with that process, and we had a 5-week very intensive organizational review, which also involved quite a lot of external benchmarking with other rugby unions around the world. How did
you compare in the benchmarking?
Interesting. The uniqueness of the Hong Kong Rugby Union is we generate a lot of money from the sevens. So we compete with tier 1 unions in some respects at a commercial level.
Yeah.
But in terms of our actual standard of rugby, we're not a tier 1. The terminology is changing, but you could say we were a tier 3 or an emerging union. So we might be benchmarking ourselves at a commercial level against the Scottish Rugby Union, but at an actual playing level, it might be Kenya or Canada, and so we had to be cognizant of that when we were comparing staffing numbers, salary levels, all of those things. I would say broadly, we came out a little bit over recompensed, overpaid, and that was then addressed, as we can come on to talk about. But equally, one has to remember that it was quite simplistic in as much as it didn't really take into account Hong Kong weighting. So the cost of living in Hong Kong in certain areas it is more expensive than living in Sydney or Auckland or London or wherever it might be.
Yes.
But anyway, that certainly there needed to be a bit of a rebalancing, and on the back of this, we ended up making, at that point in time, 16 role consolidations, so 16 redundancies, and all of middle and senior management took a pay cut between 10 and 20%, and that was pretty painful.
Very painful.
And over the next, so in total over the course of the pandemic up to this point, we've ended up making about 50 redundancies, which includes our full-time professional men's 15s program. So the organisation, as I'm sure we'll come to talk about, has gone through really significant, substantial, fundamental changes on the back of the pandemic.
So 50, if you've got 95 still and you made about 50 redundant, that's a third of your total workforce.
Correct.
That's huge. Yeah.
Yeah.
And for the rest of take pay cuts, that's that's very honourable, because what that's saying is for those of us that remain, there's a bit of pain for us too. But so going forward, then you are working on a new business model and some new revenue streams.
Yeah. So the first bit was, okay, we've got to cut the cloth. We've got to on the back of this, we've made about 13 million Hong Kong dollars of recurrent annual savings.
Okay.
So that was important. We did have money in the bank. We were very lucky. On the union board over the years, we've had a lot of Scottish chartered accountants who have been very careful with money. So, we went into this with money in the
double
bank.
Whammy there, Scottish and chartered accountants all in one. Good on you.
So the money was for a rainy day, and as we all know, it wasn't just rainy; it was pouring. So that's been important. But then, yes, the looking at how could we. In the end, what we've done is we've siloed areas of the business, and we've tried to make them independently financially sustainable. So, as an example, the work that we're doing around the community and the community foundation, sport for change, sport for development, we have gone out and we have managed to find a significant donor sponsor who have basically given us the money for 3 years that will protect all of that area. So those programs and the staff that are involved in those programs, they can, have a certain degree of confidence in their future over the coming 3 years.
Yes.
Same thing, our sevens programs, our men's and women's athletes, that is underpinned by money from the Hong Kong Sports Institute. So again, their funding is safeguarded, dependent on results, but is safeguarded for, again, the next 2-3 years.
Fantastic.
And so this approach of, as I say, trying to identify ways in which we can reduce the risk across the organisation by chunking it down and finding ways to finance it without this 100% reliance just on the success of the sevens.
I think other clubs, sporting clubs and community clubs and other not-for-profits would be interested to know how you went about obtaining that sponsorship. Were they close relationships that you already had?
So the funding has come. I can't say the name there because we haven't publicly announced it, but
okay,
it's a major charity funder in Hong Kong, who, yes, we had done a little bit of work with them previously, and I think that was important in terms of, so they knew about us, and they'd already done sort of due diligence on us. They knew we had a good reputation, so that was important. Yeah. But I think equally we worked with them over quite a long period of time, 4 or 5 months, with the programs to ensure that we were delivering what they wanted to achieve from their funding. So that in some cases meant a little bit of tweaking in terms of delivery numbers, just exactly the outcomes we were looking for. And some of the programs, a little bit of a change in focus. So again, as we'll come and talk about, we've ended up doing, and some of that was also dictated by what was going on in the community. So more, for example, more youth mental health programs.
Yes.
That ticked the box for the funder.
Yeah.
There was a pressing need for it anyway.
Yeah.
And it built on some of the existing programs that we were already doing. So I think a willingness to be flexible, to think outside the box, to collaborate with the funder to make sure that we were, both groups were happy with the outcomes that we were working towards.
Yeah.
And I think, and we were lucky because, as I said, well, it wasn't luck. Because of the work we've done over the years, we had a good reputation, we had a good brand, and the funder felt that we were an organisation that could be trusted to deliver.
That community outreach work that you do, particularly with youth mental health, I remember when I lived in Singapore, I was very conscious of the youth mental health issues both in Singapore and Hong Kong, and heard lots of terrible stories about the challenges of youth and the suicide rates and so forth. And I presume you already still had that. I guess it was the same as when I lived in Singapore some years ago, and then now you add to that the whole COVID thing, which means that they can't attend school, they can't attend sport, they can't attend the other community clubs. So there's this increased isolation, living in apartments, and I feel that, I'm sure that those challenges are increasing for cities like Hong Kong around the world. So for you to have that funding and to be able to continue to do that work is an amazing outcome.
Yeah, and I mean, you've hit the nail on the head, and again, I think this is a bit of a recurring theme, that those problems, as you say, those challenges were already here in our community. We've got shocking levels of youth depression, youth suicide. So it wasn't COVID that created that; it's COVID that has worsened it. As you say, it's again just exacerbated existing challenges that were there. Of course, the frustrating thing, particularly in the midst of last year when we were not locked down to the extent that some cities have been, but significant restrictions and schools were off and all that sort of stuff. So at the time when actually we most wanted to be in contact with the young people and reaching out and working with them, because of COVID, we weren't able to do that in the same way. So again, there had to be, like for so many businesses, there had to be this this pivot, and the use of Zoom and virtual approaches and social media, and how do we try and keep our youngsters engaged and make sure that they know that we're there for them, and very, very challenging. Thankfully, now we're at least back to a situation where there can be more face-to-face engagement, which for us as a sport is obviously pretty critical.
You were talking with the clubs about how to develop new product, how to keep the communities engaged, how to generate revenues. What are they feeling? What are they asking you for in terms of support?
And the first thing I would say is I've just been blown away and so proud of the way in which the clubs adapted to the situation and came up with some very, very creative ways to engage with their own membership, but also to equally to try and have a positive impact and to help those less fortunate than themselves, both within Hong Kong community and elsewhere. So we saw not saying all of them, but the majority of them doing virtual relays, races, you know, kind of virtual walks from Hong Kong to London, and cycle and raising money for charities, and it was just great. And it not only did it, I think, really help bring people together and give them, even if they were in quarantine, you know, they were pacing around their hotel room, measuring the steps. It gave them some positivity. It gave them something to look forward to, a bit of a focus, a bit of a target. Kept them socially engaged, because they were talking to each other within the clubs. They were competing against each other. The clubs were competing. It was fantastic to see. And to be fair, that wasn't driven by the union. So that was the clubs coming up with that stuff, which was superb.
Yeah.
What we've tried to do, I guess, is firstly support their efforts through our own marketing and communications. So our teams here would be following their posts and all the stuff they were doing, and reposting and making sure. So the Valley Rugby Club who were doing this, we'd make sure the rest of the community knew what Valley were doing, and that in turn would encourage other clubs to do stuff. So we were kind of, I suppose, a communications hub. We've also, we try to be sort of the centre of research and development. So work with the clubs on. So for example, if the youth mental health stuff, we won't deliver that all themselves. We will work with the clubs to help them deliver into their geographical catchment areas. Right. So very much a collaborative approach with the clubs. And I think the other important thing, at a really fundamental level, what we also try to do with them is, as far as possible, maintain the level of funding that we could. They didn't get everything that they would have normally done, but equally we didn't cut them off and say, right, that's it, you can't have any money. We made sure that they had enough money to keep operating. They didn't go insolvent. So I think that was important, that we were able to do that as well.
So all the clubs have survived?
Yeah.
That's fantastic news. I'm wondering about alternative means of producing an income. Are you thinking about digital outlets, playing past games on sports channels where you can generate some revenue? Have you been speaking to Sky Sports? I mean, there are other ways to keep the sport alive, keep sevens alive. I know that you also have women's clubs, women's games, you have rugby for deaf, you've got lots of other different types of offerings. I'm just wondering, how do you keep all that alive? Are you going to be thinking about a digital channel which can help produce some income at the same time?
Yeah, it's so again, sorry to sound like a stock record, but we were our and I can prove it. We were thinking of this even before COVID. So our strategic plan. We work on 4-year strategic plans. There's a strategic plan that was published in November 2019.
Right.
Referenced the fact that we were, as an organisation, over the next 4 years, we were going to go on a digital transformation journey. Yeah. We were going to become a data-driven organisation. So the commitment was already there. Again, we just expected it would take a little bit longer to get there. But what we found was that our existing data, digital, or the communication tools just weren't fit for purpose in the pandemic. Yeah. We were very traditional. We relied very much on a cascade communication system. So, we would send messages to the chairman of the 21 clubs and associations, and then they would let their members know and all that sort of stuff. So we have now, we brought on board very early in the piece, because again, we were already kind of looking at this, a new player registration, club registration platform out of Australia called Game Day. So that is now at the heart and core of what we do. So all of our 10,000 players, our coaches, our referees, everybody is accessible through that system. And that's so that we can communicate with them individually and as groups and etc. And we've also we've also engaged with Pump Jack Data, who that's a fan engagement strategy. And again, this goes back to building the stronger bond between ourselves and the fan base, on the basis that the more that we know about each other, the more that you know, we can help our sponsors to reach out to people who are interested in those products. We can become much more focused, and those two tools, the Game Day and Pump Jack, are very much now at the heart of what we're going to be doing as an organisation over the coming years, and hopefully that will really provide different ways of engagement with a customer base, and different revenue streams, and different ways of accessing those revenue streams.
I'm just going to switch to this beautiful image that your lovely colleague sent to me, because when you can see the crowds in this beautiful stadium who've come to watch the Sevens game, there'll be a lot of people that are feeling a bit sad about its, you know, being postponed, just like the other games all around the world. What would you say to your fans about you know, the future, and what's your vision about when it's coming back? How you're going to keep this excitement going? Have you got thoughts that would give them, you know, suggestions for how they can stay engaged?
Yeah, I mean, I think
it's a beautiful crowd. Look at them, you know.
yeah, they are 40,000, and yeah, every one of them is beautiful.
Yeah.
The amazing thing about our Sevens family is they don't come once. I mean, it is a kind of a bucket list thing, but once they've been once, they come back and they come back and they come back. And our market research,
I know people who have done that. Yeah, they get hooked on it. That's what I'm saying. It's kind of like addictive because it's such a special event.
But
yeah,
because they come back repeatedly, they then they come back with friends, but they also make friends, and yeah, you know, that so many of them they'll come here, they will go to, you know, the same pub on the Friday, you know, before the event. Yeah. When they get in the stadium, they'll go and meet at a certain concession stand at a certain time, and they know that friends from around the world will gather there. They'll be wearing, you know, their Hong Kong Sevens shirt from 20 years ago, and people will stop them and say, "Oh, I was at that." It's just, I'm confident that people will come back because it's like going back to visit your family. You know what I mean? But we're all looking forward to the opportunity to get back and see our family and friends that we haven't seen for, you know, a year, 18 months. Yeah. And Hong Kong is like that as well. You know, I mean, and they're getting messages from, so yesterday, the legendary Wasali Rbbie, the Fijian legend, you know, who comes out every year, he's texted me saying, you know, when's the Sevens back on? I'm so missing it. I'll be there. So Rbbie's mum comes every year. You know, it's just for anybody who hasn't been.
Yes. You just got to come.
It's a very special and unique atmosphere and environment. You know, 40,000 people, and again, I'm not drawing comparisons with any other event, but 40,000 people come, and they do have a really, really good time. There's the expression here, if you get bored, you can turn around and watch the rugby. And yet, there isn't trouble. Yeah, it's so good-natured. People just want to sing Sweet Caroline. They want to have a few beers, have a laugh, boo the Australians. But it's all so good-natured, good-humoured. There's nothing like it.
Yes. Should we switch for a minute just to talk about Hong Kong as a nation? and what some of the differences and changes that you've seen happen over the last 18 months, as a society, as we both mentioned earlier, you've got this backdrop of social unrest because of, some political legislative changes that, people have been up in arms about, for good reason, I suppose. But with that going on, as well as COVID, what's your sense, or when you're with colleagues and board members and senior people talking about, how to address your own issues, what do they share with you? What's the talk about the change in flavour in Hong Kong over the last 18 months?
Yeah, I mean, it's obviously it's a source of great discussion in the bars and restaurants and coffee shops. Hong Kong has had a rough ride over the last couple of years. I think there is, broadly speaking, there is still a strong belief in the resilience of the people in Hong Kong and the resilience of this place, this barren rock, that has developed into a financial centre of the world and all that went with it. But I think as well, the political unrest and COVID has also reminded us of some of the systemic problems that we also have, and societal problems. Hong Kong is a place where at one end you have incredible wealth, and at the other end you have got really significant poverty, and we've got one of the biggest wealth gaps in the world. Mm-hmm. And a lot of the people at the disadvantaged end of that spectrum have been badly affected by both the political unrest and COVID, because the effect on businesses like tourism, travel, hotels, restaurants, bars, retail, all of that have had an extremely difficult 18 months. So it has, I think, highlighted some of the problems that we need to face as a community, as a society over the coming years. And we also need to build or rebuild social cohesion. It's been a painful process, and it's left us, I would say, reeling a bit. And there is I guess it's the rebuilding of brand Hong Kong globally, but within our own community, we need to work hard to rebuild social cohesion. Yes,
you've been there about 30 years. What was it that brought you there? Was it work or family, or you came after university, I think?
So I finished university and studied history at university, which was great. I had a fantastic 3 years. I had no idea what I wanted to do. Yeah. And I'd never really seen much of the world. And one of my brothers, he was a policeman in what was then the Royal Hong Kong Police Force. Huh. So, and I knew that he enjoyed it. I'd never been to Hong Kong, but I thought, right, I'll have a go at that. So in those days, you could actually apply to join the Hong Kong Police from Commonwealth countries, from UK or from Australia or Canada or New Zealand. Yeah. So I applied. I was lucky enough to be successful. So August the 20th, 1992, I arrived in Hong Kong. Wow. Fantastic. Now, unfortunately for me, that brother happened to be my physical training instructor at the police training school. Okay. And to say that he took advantage of the opportunity to make my everyday Pamela a living hell is not.
Is he an older brother, or is he an older brother? Yeah,
8 years older.
Yeah. So if you contrast Hong Kong 30 years ago, when you first arrived, to today, what do you think are the most significant cultural challenges or changes and opportunities and challenges? I mean, what are the key things that you've noticed in the last couple of years, which are either challenges or opportunities for Hong Kong going forward? Because the opportunities are the things that are going to get us through COVID. We still don't know how long it's going to take to get out of this. Nobody has an answer. Obviously, it's to do with, when the whole world is vaccinated or when a region is vaccinated. And there are parts of Asia that are well developed and other parts that are still developing. And the developing parts of Asia may take longer to do the vaccine run and so forth. So I'm just wondering what you think are the strengths of Hong Kong to get it through this. But in the backdrop of that last comment, which is, we've had a difficult time and we need to do some rethinking and rebranding and repositioning. I just wonder, is there a contrast between 30 years ago and today?
Yeah, I mean, I think
Worth noting.
one of the shifts has been from back in at that time, Hong Kong was very much seen as being the gateway to mainland China. So lots of companies, would set up in Hong Kong because they wanted to do business in China. So Hong Kong had got, clearly we got common law. It was very safe place, very kind of Western friendly. So it was the bridging point between East and West, between China and the rest of the world. Mm-hmm. Obviously, since then, whether it be Shanghai or Beijing or just across the border from where we are, Shenzhen, Guangzhou, you could actually, back in 1992, you could look across the border from Hong Kong and it was like paddy fields. Yeah. Well, now it's hard to see where the border is because it's as built up on the other side as it is in Hong Kong. Yes. So that's changed, but I think that for Hong Kong equally, the opportunity has shifted from not being a gateway to China, but being part of this Greater Bay Area consolidated zone. So as those 9 other cities in the southern part of Guangdong have developed, alongside obviously Macau, which has just changed beyond belief from what it was like as 1992. It was this wonderful little sleepy, like a Portuguese influenced place that you could go for a nice quiet weekend. Now it's like, the Vegas of the East. It's just incredible. So these 11 cities with a combined population of over 70 million people, that I think is now where Hong Kong's opportunity lies in the coming years. So I think companies now don't need a gateway into China. They can go into China. They can go and do business in China. They don't need to go to Hong Kong. Mm-hmm. But I think we can be part of something very exciting with the Greater Bay Area and still bring those traditional strengths. Still bring the rule of law and everything else that has made Hong Kong what it is over the course of its history.
Yes. Yeah, no, that's a really good point, because it is a wonderful city, and it has a global reputation for being a major financial centre of the world. 100 years of UK rule, which is added something to the whole region, not just to Hong Kong. And as you say, that southern area having developed does provide a massive growth opportunity for Hong Kong and the changes going forward. Do you think that that citizens of Hong Kong are generally on board with that? Do you think that across all sectors that people are looking north to that southern part of China saying, come on, let's ramp up, what can we do to take advantage of this?
I think broadly, I think the way I would describe it is Hong Kong, I think we are collectively going through a bit of a kind of a teenage angst identity crisis. So
what does it mean?
It was weird when in the early 90s, a lot of people were concerned about 1997 and the change of sovereignty, and lots of local people left Hong Kong in those years to go and get residency in other countries. Then around the handover post 97, there was a wave of Chinese patriotism in Hong Kong. People actually kind of were really excited to be reunited with the motherland, and there was a bit of a kind of a colonial UK backlash.
Yes.
And then I think people just sort of, got on with lives and dealt with financial crises and SARS and everything else. And now, obviously, I think we're clearly moving into another period of greater integration with the mainland. And again, we're seeing Hong Kong families, a number of them making decisions to leave Hong Kong and go elsewhere. So again, it's a bit of a state of flux. I think, having seen what's happened over the last 30 years, I think it's just another phase, and I think Hong Kong will. It goes back to that point about the resilience.
Yes.
Ultimately, Hong Kong people are pretty pragmatic.
Yeah.
They want to have a roof over their head. They want to have 3 nice meals a day, and they want to make sure that the kids are okay and they get a good education.
Yeah.
And by and large,
yes,
that's what people are focused on.
Yes. Yeah. Well, look, and I am looking forward to the return of Hong Kong Sevens. Do you have a rough idea of whether you might be able to run a game like Tokyo is doing without a crowd? Is that a possibility? Could you just give us a little hint of that before we close off?
No. I mean, we're looking. We're talking to the government, looking at lots of different options. We're talking with World Rugby. That for us, going without a crowd, unfortunately, doesn't work. It doesn't work from a commercial point of view, but it also doesn't work. I mean, to go back to what we talked about before, the essence of the Sevens is the crowd, and it's the event and it's the atmosphere. So we wouldn't do it without a crowd. So look, I mean, we're keen to get Sevens back on, as you can imagine, and we're watching with great interest what happens at the Olympics. We've actually got a referee. A Hong Kong referee is up there refereeing in the Rugby Sevens. So
excellent.
That's great. Good to see. Our teams just missed out in the repechage, but yeah. So watching with interest, continuing, as I say, dialogue with our stakeholders, with the government, with World Rugby, and fingers crossed.
Fingers crossed. Well, I mean, all the rugby clubs all around the world, all the sports clubs all around the world have all got their fingers crossed, and we've got our fingers and toes crossed for you too, Robbie, because I'd love to see it back on soon, and we'll be watching closely. So what I'd like to do is thank you so much for giving us the great insight into what's happening in the rugby world in Hong Kong, and also for sharing a little bit about yourself and your journey, 30 years through the Hong Kong police force and into the rugby world, and to give us a sense of what's happening in Hong Kong. We don't normally get the opportunity to hear from people in other cities of the world, and I think, Thrive 2030, the opportunity here is to hear what's happening, so that we might all learn from one another about how to get through this pandemic, and what everyone is doing with their own pivot, and to try and put some clarity on how long it might take and how do we weather the storm. So thank you so much for your thoughts today, Robbie. We look forward to coming to the next game, and we'll keep close. Rbbie McRobbie from Hong Kong Rugby Union in Hong Kong. Thanks, Robbie. All the best.
Thank you, Pamela.
You're welcome.